Okay, so I've already covered short field and soft field takeoffs in previous videos. So today what we're going to do is we're actually going to take a step back and we're going to look at what a normal takeoff looks like. Now, of course, because this is a game, you could just load into a mission or a free flight and just jam the throttle and end up in the air. But there are a little additional things that you can do that will make your experience feel a little bit more lifelike and make the takeoff a little bit more stable as well. So we're going to jump straight into the simulator today to look at those things and do a quick demonstration and explanation of everything you should know for a normal takeoff. Alright, so the first thing I always do before taking off is I check the wind direction. You want to make sure that you're taking off from a runway that is facing into the wind as much as possible. Obviously, you won't be able to have a wind that's coming straight at you all the time, but you want to reduce that angle as much as possible to make it easier for you to get off the ground. I've done a few videos on wind already, and I'll make sure to add a link somewhere around here for you to go watch those if you're interested in it. I cover how to handle crosswind takeoffs, how to adjust the wind settings to test different scenarios, and cover the effects of wind as well. So the next thing that's important to check for your takeoff is the trim. You can see the current settings for the trim right here. At the moment it's set to the takeoff position. You can also see the trim from the inside of the plane. So if we go inside, and you can see it right there, that's the actual trim wheel. So if I were to start adjusting the trim, you see it actually turns it right there. But you can't really see what setting it's set to from here, so I find it's actually better to use the external view to be able to set it back to the takeoff position before takeoff. So the reason you want the elevator trim set to the takeoff position is that it makes it fairly easy to rotate once you reach the right airspeed and get airborne. If you have the trim set too high or too low, you'll either not be able to get off the runway at all, or the plane is going to try and go nose up much more than you would actually want it to as well. Having it in the takeoff position has it in the best place for takeoff. It's not too much of a nose up position, and it's not too much of a nose down position. So the next setting to check is the flaps. There are three settings for flaps. There is no flaps in the Cub. There is also the first setting, and there is the landing setting. So for our takeoff, you could either use no flaps or the first level of flaps. I like to use the first level of flaps. It creates a little bit of extra lift and makes the takeoff a little bit more stable as well. Of course, if you're flying another plane, you'll have to look up what flap settings to use for a normal takeoff. Usually that's fairly easy to find. You can just look up the pilot's operating handbook online and just use whatever is listed in there. So at this point, we're almost ready for takeoff. The final thing that's important to understand how it works is the rudder. The rudder is the control surface at the back of the plane that I can operate with the twist motion of my joystick, which you see I'm doing right now. So what's going to happen when we apply power is that the tail is going to come up, and the plane is going to want to veer either to the left or the right, depending on the prevailing winds. You actually use the rudder to keep yourself aligned with the runway center line. Otherwise, what would happen is you would end up veering off the runway. So as you start accelerating down the runway, you want to make sure to keep an eye on your airspeed. In the Cub that I'm flying today, the speed that we take off at, which is called VR, and the R stands for rotate, is around 70 to 75 kilometers an hour. Again, if you're flying a different plane, you'll have to look up what that speed is for your plane. So once you do reach that airspeed, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to pull back slightly on the stick, and you're going to want to hold the plane in that pitch attitude until you're airborne. So you can see when I pull back on the stick there that the elevators are pointed up, which will help get us off the ground. So you'll hold that pitch until you're airborne, and the plane is then going to quickly accelerate to another speed called Vy, which is the speed at which you have the best rate of climb. That speed is again different for each airplane. In the Cub, it's 112, 110 kilometers an hour, we'll say. And once you do reach that speed, you can start cleaning up the airplane, so you can retract the flaps. And if you have retractable landing gear, you can retract the landing gear. And finally, you can use the elevator trim to not have to hold any back pressure on the stick to hold your climb. Alright, so we are pretty much ready for takeoff after looking at all of that. So I'm just going to go to the interior view, and I like to zoom out just a little bit so I can have a bit of a better field of view out of the plane until the tail comes up. And we'll just go through the procedure like we were just talking about. So I'm going to apply a little bit of power, get us moving. There we go, and now I'll just apply full power. Tail will come up. I'll use the rudder, stay aligned with center line, 70, I pitch, and there we go, I hold that pitch until we get to 110 or so kilometers an hour. Alrighty, and then I adjust the pitch to hold that speed, so I'm actually climbing a little bit faster. Now that we've reached a safe altitude, I'll retract the flaps and I'll reduce power a little bit just to make it a little bit of a smoother climb to altitude. And at this point, I'm pretty much all set. All I really have to do now is trim the plane if I want to, although I think it's pretty much alright the way it is. And I can just let the plane climb to cruise altitude like this. So that's really all there is to it. I think the key takeaways here are that taking off is fairly easy, and there's just a few little procedures you can add to your routine so to make it just a little bit more realistic. And then from there you can just do your takeoff and continue on with your flight. So if there are any questions or comments, make sure to leave them below. Otherwise, I will see you again next time. Bye bye.